Welcome to the Better Relationships, Better Work webcast, where we explore how to make work better through the power of relationships. My name's Jason Lauritsen. I'm the author of 2 books, a speaker and leadership trainer on a mission to fix how we treat people at work. In this episode, we talk a lot about communication. Specifically, we offer some tips on what to do when you say the wrong things, which we all do that probably more often than we'd like to admit. So this is a super helpful episode. We also discuss why it is our diversity and differences that create the richness in our relationship with others. My guest this week is O'Brien McMahon. O'Brien is a man of many talents and interests. He spends most of his days working as senior vice president with Lauritsen, where he helps organizations with total reward solutions. He's also the host of the People Business podcast, which I would highly recommend. It's actually how I met O'Brien. I was a guest on his show. And finally, perhaps most interestingly, he's the author of a recently published children's book titled How You Become You. It is a wonderful book. I have purchased it and bought it and read it, and then I've given it as a gift. It's got an incredible message that speaks both to children and to adults. I think you will love it. Any rate, you will find the links to his podcast, the book, and how to connect with him in the episode description. I'm glad you are here so you can enjoy my conversation with O'Brien McMahon. O'Brien, thank you for making time to have this conversation with me. I appreciate it.
Very excited to be here. Always fun to connect.
So let's start by getting to know you and your relationship or relational style a little bit, if you will, seeing how we're going to talk about relationships. I think this will be helpful. So I think I know the answer to this question already, but on the scale of introvert to extrovert, where do you consider yourself? Where do you place yourself on that scale?
I place myself tipping into the introvert category. I had thought for a long time I was an extrovert. I like people for the most part. I enjoy being in public spaces. I enjoy public speaking. I enjoy team sports. I've always been a pretty outgoing guy, pretty easy to talk to. But if an introvert versus an extrovert is somebody who gets energy in social situations versus has energy depleted in social situations, I'm more on the introvert side, where I enjoy it, but I like my alone time to reboot. I like a book, a journal, a quiet space, a walk, a workout, whatever it is, to recharge myself.
And this is why I am not in the business of predicting anything, because I would have been wrong in my prediction. So I would have predicted you for sure as an extrovert just based on what I know about you. So
I present extrovert.
You present that's a great way to put it. So
yeah.
All right. So how do you think your sort of where you think of yourself on that scale, sort of trending or tipping towards introvert, how do you think that impacts how you show up in relationships or how you approach relationship building?
I think it shows up in an interesting way in that I like to go deep pretty quickly, and not a lot of people are willing to do that or interested in doing that. But the other thing, so I took the, Strength Finders recently, and one of my top things, or no, I'm sorry, it wasn't Strength Finders. It was a assessment that we do through Lauritsen, the company I work for, and it assesses a number of different traits. So my top one was openness on that scale. And so I'm a very open person. I like deep conversations, but I don't necessarily connect with people easily. So I can go real deep, real fast, but to build a real deep, meaningful, ongoing relationship takes some time for me. And so I tend to have a smaller group of really, really tight core friends. And then I have 1,000 friendly acquaintances, kind of all different walks of life and industries, personality types. I just like good people who are engaged in the world, and I don't really care where you come from. So I like a lot of people, small group of very close friends.
Got it. Thank you for that. So let's go in the Wayback Machine. Um, what is something that you learned about relationships growing up as a child that still shapes how you think about or approach relationships today?
So it's interesting. I kind of chuckle when you say that because growing up, I wouldn't say I was surrounded by bad kids necessarily. I was surrounded by kids who were doing things I didn't like or appreciate. And I had a string of very close friends who, for lack of a better word, turned on me. They either, suddenly cut me off or actively tried to put me in a bad position. And it was kind of from elementary school up through high school. It just kept happening every couple years. And so I have a tendency to be pretty quick to just cut somebody off. And I think I still can be trusting on the front end, trust but verify. Um, but it's actually something I've been working on as an adult is creating more broader relationships and not being as quick to judge somebody when they do something that doesn't quite align with who I am or how I live my life. Just because they're doing something different doesn't mean they're bad. Just because they do something or hold themselves to a different standard than I hold doesn't mean that that's a bad standard. It's just different than how I live my life. And so I've actually been trying as an adult to address that and sort of like take that volume down a little bit to allow myself better connection with more people.
One of the interesting things about this question is the more that I ask it, the more I'm coming to realize that the bulk of what we carry with us that we learned is not positive. It's things that we have to overcome, sadly. So perhaps that is I guess it's a call to us as parents to teach positive relationship skills or model to our kids, or somehow try to think about that. I don't know. I don't know what the
or just recognize that middle school sucks and everybody's going to come out of it with scars. And the sooner you can help move through that, the better.
Indeed, indeed. What would you say you value most in a friendship? Like when you look at a friend, what do you value? What quality or characteristic do you value most highly in a friend?
I value good people who accept me for who I am.
It's a good criteria. I like it.
Yeah. I think if I think about my closest friends, I can be a quirky guy. I have a lot of interests. And I have found that when you have interests outside the norm interests, you can get labeled as a nerd or a dork or whatever, and I've borne those titles at various times. But I just, it's just who I am. I'm passionate about a lot of things and I'm curious about a lot of things. And the close friends that I have are just good people who are like, yeah, rock on, man, go for it. Like, keep going, go further. That's what I like.
So one of the legacies we're trying to leave with our children or through our children is to value being called a weirdo. Like we when we talk to each other and like they'll be like, "You're so weird," and I'm like, "Yeah, I know." Like, so are you, and that's a great thing, man. Like being weird is amazing, and so hopefully they'll cherish and seek out the weirdos too and embrace that. So I love that. I love that.
Yeah, well, I've had the blessing to work with a company called Built to Lead through Lauritsen, and I got into it as a leadership development program. But they have, as part of their individual coaching program, they have this framework that you can use to build a strong sense of self, and it's really just 6 questions that you answer over and over and over again. A couple of them, the key ones are: what do I believe? What do I love? What are my principles? What are my purposes? Those kinds of things. And you just write out as many as you can and you rinse it. And I've done a lot of this work. And I actually was inspired to turn that into a children's book, which came out in late 2023 called How You Become You. And we're all weird. We're all our own selves. I was listening to a John Batiste song the other day and it said, be who you are. Everybody else is already taken. I just like that, right? We're all weird. The guy who goes and joins the military straight out of high school, that's weird, but it's awesome and it's great for that person. It's super honorable. The person who loves music and is passionate and throws their whole life into it, that's weird. That's not normal. And yet it's amazing and they can produce amazing works of art. And, fill in the blank with any other thing that you're interested in. I think the more we encourage people to be whoever they want to be and just really, turn that spotlight up, I think we're all better for it.
Agreed. Amen. I say amen. All right. So let's dig into the personal relationship that this homework I gave you. Think about a personal relationship, a strong, healthy relationship in your life that we can maybe dig into a little bit and learn from. So what relationship are we going to talk about?
The one that makes me nervous to talk about, which is probably the one that we should talk about, is with my wife. We have been married for, it will be, 8 years this year coming up, and we've been together for 13 years now. And in the last 5 years, we have had 2 kids, lived through a pandemic. My wife, when we got married, was on the road for 18 months out of the first 24 months of our marriage. So we've gone through a lot in the last couple of years and spent a lot of time thinking about what our relationship is. And there's been some good times and some harder times. And so we can dive into that one.
All right. Well, I love that. Let's, like you said, you like to go deep. Let's openness. Let's go deep. So what would you say? So just to help us understand, when you think about your relationship with your wife, what would you say you value most about that relationship, or how would you describe kind of what you feel most strongly about in terms of describing what makes that relationship healthy and positive?
Yeah, the thing I like most about it, it goes back to what you asked me before about what do I like, what do I look for in relationships? And I wasn't actually even thinking about my wife when I gave that answer, but I mean, she fits that to a T. She's my biggest cheerleader. I try as best as I can to be her biggest cheerleader. We had written into our vows when we got married that we would support each other, but not stand in the way of each other, help each other grow. We talk about that kind of thing. That was one of the things that I think attracted us to each other originally. And then what do I enjoy about our relationship, or what do I think has allowed us to continue with such a strong relationship, is the way that we communicate. I think we have not always communicated well, but we have always communicated. And I think that's important. I would say something and she would start crying or be like, why would you say that? But we would continue to talk through it, right? And I'd say, well, here's where I'm coming from. Here's what I'm trying to say. And she'd say, well, here's what that sounds like to me when you say that. And we would work it out and we'd get through that stuff together. We wouldn't just shut off. We would keep communicating. And we just found that working through that stuff was successful. And so she'll check in with me and say, hey, how are we doing? Feels like something's off. I'll check in with her and do the same. Again, it's not like our relationship is all sunshine and rainbows, but the ability and willingness to continue to communicate and understand each other allows us to get through that stuff.
So let's dive into that. I love that because I think that's such an important, communication obviously is kind of the lifeblood of any relationship. So, or any positive relationship. So talk to me about how you make that work. Like, cause I knowing you, I'm assuming you probably can tease out some things like, or you have some kind of agreements in place or whatever that have improved your relationship. So how do you make communication work, or what specifically do you do that makes that communication work?
I wish I had more rules for you. I think one of the things that has worked for us is that we have figured out a lot of things that don't work in communication. And we have both been open to the fact, maybe begrudgingly at first, but we have both been open to the fact that the way that we communicate originally might not be the best way. And, she will say something to me and I'll say, like, do you have any idea how that just came across? Or like, let me repeat that back to you. And, it hurts to hear that stuff because she's trying to get her point across and to realize that it's doing damage when she tries to get it across. That's tough to hear. probably happens to me more than it does to her, right? Where I'll just say something really, really quick. And she's like, oh my God, that's like the worst thing you could say. And so then it's like, okay, well, what's a better way to get that point across? And we have talked about, okay, well, we'll get to the end and say, well, here's what I meant to say. Here's why I said it. Here's the real essence of it. And we sort of, once we've unpacked that, then it's like, okay, how can we do this better next time? Okay, next time I'll just try to bring this to you in this way, or I'll wait and not do it on a day when you're feeling, when I can tell you're feeling this way or you're overwhelmed or whatever. So I guess what I'm trying to say, if I distill this down, is one is work to unpack what you're really trying to say when it doesn't go well. And then once you get to that and you kind of get agreement on that, you're like, okay, we both understand each other, then go back and figure out how to make it better the next time so you don't just repeat the problem.
It's interesting as you say that, because I think about Angie and I have had similar conversations over the years, and at the end, what I find interesting, and I don't know if this has happened to you, is sometimes at the end of all of that, I'll say, okay, what should I have said? Like, let's rewind it all the way to the beginning.
Yeah.
Like, what should I have said at the beginning of this? Now that you know all the context of what I wanted to, and what I'm amazed by is that sometimes it's very clear. She'll say, well, here's, and she gives me some kind of thoughts or advice. But then there are other times where she's like, I don't know. I don't know that there was a good way to say it. I'm just glad you said it so we could have the conversation. But like sometimes there's not I think it's the conversation after that first thing that probably is the thing, as opposed to trying to say it perfectly in the first place. Oftentimes it's like just knowing that there's a net there, I think, is really powerful.
Yeah, being willing to like stay in the arena together and hash it out a little bit. The other thing is communication is a skill. Like we think we know how to talk, and so we should be able to, well, I mean, this is how I feel. I should be able to communicate it. And yet there's this style to communicating what you want in a way that it can be heard. And I mean, there's levels to the game, right? And understanding that, the more you can try to improve the way you communicate, I think the more effective you're going to be with anybody, your spouse or coworker, or anybody else. The other tricky part in communicating sometimes, especially on the really hard stuff, my wife, after having our two kids, has kind of gone through her own mental health journey. And there were certain scenarios where the thing that was bothering me was also the thing that would trigger her negative feelings about herself. And so how do I bring up this thing that is a real issue for me in a way that doesn't make her feel even worse about herself? And that was probably the hardest thing for us to navigate, where, to your point, it's like, there's no good way to say how I'm feeling. I just have to know that this is going to hurt her at first. So I have to both be advocating for myself and supporting her, and, it's sitting in it to get to the other side of it. And, it's not easy. Humans are messy. And, but I think the relationships that you value, you have to commit to. And one of my beliefs, going back to the Built to Lead work that I've written down, is that I really believe all relationships are like a fire, and you have to feed the fire in order for it to stay strong. And, healthy communication is just one of, if not the key traits of that.
Lots of good stuff in there. So let's transition over to the other part of the homework I gave you, which was to think about a work relationship that has had a significant positive impact on you or your career. So, what relationship are we going to talk about there?
Well, there are a couple that I could go to. I guess we'll go with a partner of mine, a colleague of mine. His name's Bob, and he came into Lockton a couple years after I did. We're a year apart in age, and have become very close friends. He works on one side of our business. I work on the other side of our business, but we become very close friends in and out of work. And I actually officiated his wedding with his wife after my wife introduced them to each other.
That's pretty profound impact. There's a lot of entanglements in there. That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Um, so when you think about this relationship, talk to me a little bit about the relation or the impact that it has had on you. Like what does the relationship feel like? What are the positive impacts for you in having this relationship with Bob?
Yeah. So there's a couple different levels to it as I was thinking about this. There's the one level that it's just nice to have a friend at work, right? And it's nice to have somebody that you can get excited with and talk about stuff. And oh my God, can you believe this? Or hey, how would you handle that? And so there's just that good sounding board at work when you get somebody you trust who can give you perspective. And I think one of the things that has drawn us together is that we are very different in a lot of ways, and we are very similarly aligned in a lot of values. And so we have like just enough kind of overlapping perspective that we can get along and understand each other and value each other's friendship. And then there's also this like totally different aspect to the other person. Like I have a tendency to be able to see some big picture stuff and like help him think through things in a way that he hasn't maybe been able to. So he comes to me as a sounding board. I mean, I use him for that too, but he has this whole sort of approach to business and is way better at our job than I am. And so I sort of glean from him all these lessons on how he approaches the work that he does. And then even on the personal side, you know, he was hanging out with my friends and I was hanging out with some of his friends, and we were able to introduce him to his wife, and he wound up bringing me on all these adventures. I had never been hunting. I'd never even shot a shotgun before, and he wound up kind of bringing me out one day, and I've been on hunting trips with he and his whole family, and we've traveled to South Dakota and other places around the country together. And so there's like all these other rich experiences that we've sort of created for each other as well. So our relationship, you know, it's a pick a work relationship. It's really both at this point, but it started from work and has spread into just creating all this really rich value for each other.
So if you could distill a lesson or two from your relationship with Bob that you've been able to maybe apply to other relationships, or that you think about a lot when you're thinking about cultivating other relationships, what would you say you can share with us?
I don't know that I have one of those off the top of my head, but I will say there's a lesson that I talk about a lot that I've come to learn over the years. And I think it is really well expressed through this relationship, which is to expand our definition of value. What is valuable to you, or what might be valuable to somebody else? And when we have work relationships, it's really easy to just think that what's valuable is something related to the work. So I'm a salesperson. We talk about building a network of contacts, centers of influence, whatever you want to call them, referral sources. And you can go out and you say like, okay, who can give me leads, right? And that is the currency of value that you kind of start looking for. And when you're a young person, it's tough because you don't have any leads, you don't have any clients. And so you can't really add any value. And it's this really tough place to start from. And what I've come to realize is value can be described in a number of different ways. And it's just a matter of what's valuable to the other person. And so what's valuable could be a really good book recommendation, especially if it's something that helps them solve a problem that they have in their business or their personal life. It could be a podcast episode that you listen to that helps them solve a problem. It could be bringing them to a charity event to make them feel good about how they're impacting the community. It could be introducing them to a new friend or a new dating partner or a new spouse. There's all these different ways that we can provide value for each other. It might just be having a good time. And so I think with Bob and I, we came together through work, and we were talking about deals, and we were helping each other through deals, but then it just sort of grew and grew and grew and grew and grew and grew. And we've wound up providing like this rich web of value to each other. And now we're super close because we have fun doing all kinds of different things, including making money, building our business, leading together, going hunting together, hanging with our spouses together, going on vacations, doing all these different activities together. And so I just always encourage, especially salespeople, just because I talk to a lot of salespeople, like if you can expand your perspective of what value could be and just are open and curious about the other person and what they value, it creates richer relationships.
Yeah, it's interesting. You talk about value because it sounds to me a lot like when Joe and I were writing Social Gravity, whenever that is, been now 15 years ago, when we were starting on that, the value, at least there's this concept called social capital. And, social capital is the value that you exchange within a relationship. And I think a lot of times I started my career in sales, so did Joe. And so that's how we kind of came to the same thing and you think about, that's one thing salespeople have as an advantage is we think transactionally about relationships because it's our job. But then you start to realize that there's so many different kinds of value that lives in, though you just illustrated a whole bunch of them, that richness is there in every individual. And then what you talked about with Bob, I think, is a great example of what we talked about. We called it creating overlap. And that overlap is basically the shared sort of, shared experiences, knowledge, values, like all of the things that this connective tissue that you build with another human, the more of that you create, then it opens a bigger door for that value to go back and forth. And so that's a really great perspective on thinking about relationships.
Yeah.
So let's talk about application. Two really, really good lessons, I think. Well, multiple lessons here that I've jotted down. But let's talk about how we can take some of this that you have shared with us and maybe apply it to how we can improve work, make the work relationship better for people, make it better for employees, because there's a lot of room to grow there for a lot of folks. So this webcast is sponsored by my longtime friends at Inspiring Workplaces. Now, if you are someone who's working to create an engaging and inspiring workplace for your employees, and of course you are, that's why you're here, then listen up. Inspiring Workplaces is a global community of tens of thousands of HR and employee experience professionals that you can join for free. As a member, you will gain access to thousands of articles and videos and podcasts and events that will help you change the world by changing the world of work. They are also home to the Inspiring Workplaces Awards that recognize the best workplaces in the world. You can learn about the application process at their website. So please go visit inspiring-workplaces.com to learn more and to join the community. That's inspiring-workplaces.com. What I heard, there was a couple of things that I heard from your conversation, or sort of the conversation about your relationship with your wife, that I think are really interesting. Number one, you summed it up, I think, nicely in stay in the arena, right? Be open to the fact that you're going to make mistakes. Stay in the arena. Be curious about how to get better.
Yeah. Be willing to mend, be willing to repair. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you think about that, I mean, that feels like a leadership lesson to me, but maybe that'll show up for you in different ways. But as you think about where that shows up in the workplace, how we could take that lesson to make work better, what comes to mind for you?
Yeah. I mean, the broader thing that comes to mind, and this comes up all the time in the podcast that I host, which you've been a wonderful guest on, and we're doing some collaborative work around, is there are so many ways to make work a more human experience, and to just recognize that our people are all people. And I don't really like bring your whole self to work, because most of our whole selves include some parts that are a little messed up and probably don't need to be in the workplace. But I think you can bring authenticity to the workplace, and you should be your true self in the workplace. I think that might be a better way to say it. Semantics, but words matter. And I think if we can I think the most under invested in or underdeveloped area, the biggest opportunity is leadership development training in companies. Because, like I said, communication is a skill. Personal interaction is a skill. We think because we're people and we grow up with people that we know how to interact with people really well, and we don't. It is a skill. Some people pick it up because they had good examples and they just sort of get it intuitively, and that's great. But not everybody is like that. One of the lessons that I learned having children is we did sleep training with our children. And this book's called, a great book for any young parents out there, 12 Hours Sleep by 12 Weeks Old. And I had a couple friends recommend it, and we followed it, and it worked. And both of our kids were sleeping through the night by 10 weeks. And I was like, oh my God, if you can train a human, a baby, how to sleep, then like everything else needs to be trained. Like if that is a skill that can be trained, then anything at all that we do in our lives can be trained and should be thought of as a skill. And this type of interaction, I think, is a skill too. And so to take people who are in leadership positions and start to teach them how to communicate, to have them practice what it means to communicate, to share tough feedback, to deal with conflict, to screw up and be able to recover it. The more reps we get in of that type of interaction, the better work becomes, I think.
Well, and one of the things too, I agree with that wholeheartedly. But I also think there's some very simple things, right, that you can start doing right away. And one of them is like in your example that you walked through with your wife reminds me of something that one of my mentors, Cy Wakeman, taught me, and she teaches years ago, is she always talks about as a manager, be willing to take a mulligan. And
Yeah.
for non-golfers, mulligan is a do-over when you hit a bad shot. And the thing is, we all screw up, right? Especially as leaders, we're gonna screw up. I mean, I could sit here and talk all day about things I've screwed up in conversations with my employees, because you get new things, your emotions kick in, you say something you shouldn't have said, or whatever happens. And being willing to, when you say stay in the arena, is like, okay, I'm committed to getting this right. I'm committed to the relationship. And so what I need to do is say, I'm sorry, I didn't handle that very well. That did not go the way that I intended it to go. Let's take another run at this, right? I'd like to
Yeah.
learn from you about how we could do this better. Or here's what I was trying to say, kind of like you modeled. Here's what I was trying to say or trying to get across. I obviously didn't communicate that very well. What ideas do you have for maybe how I could communicate that more effectively to you in the future, right? Part of this is being willing to just stand back in it, stay in the arena, ask for feedback, learn through the experience, and use that to get better. So I think there's a really
Yeah.
powerful leadership lesson in there.
Well, there's another part of that too. So one of the things that I've even come up with recently is the realization that, or the mantra, I guess, that my goal is for my wife and I to be moving closer together all the time. Like, I want this to be great. I don't want this to be bad. I want it to be great. I want us to be close. And so the moments when I'm like, I can't believe that she just, and you're like fuming and you're filled with so much anger toward this other person, I try as best I can to remind myself, you know what, like, I know I'm feeling this, but like the goal is to be closer together. And the last thing you feel in that moment is closeness. But if you can remind yourself, look, the goal is that we're getting closer and closer. So what do we need to do? How do we need to work through this? How do I give some grace? How do I ask for a mulligan, whatever it is? And I think that applies to the workforce too. Like, we are all on the same team. We are out for performance. We are out for success. We're out to have a good time while we're doing the work we're doing. We all want that. Everybody wants this to be a good experience and a successful experience. And so even though they're cranky today and I just really wish they would shut the F up and do their work and like stop complaining about this, like the goal is for us to be moving closer together so we could be more successful. And I think it's a good mantra.
And I would say it's even more than a mantra if as a leader or a manager, I think one of the things, I mean, what you said, relationships, in the relationships you value, you have to make a commitment, which is what you're talking about right now. And I think it's committing to the relationship, it's committing to the person. And I think so often what happens is, as managers, we're not committed to the person. We're committed to what they could do for us or for me. We're committed to this thing that we think that they can do. And when that gets a little wonky, if we're not committed to the person, it's very easy for that relationship to get blown off course.
Yep.
And people can feel it too, like when you're not committed. And so I do think that there's a real mindset issue here with managers too. That's like, you have to be committed to the person, to the individual, to seeing them succeed. And that's going to mean at times there's going to be conversations you're going to have that aren't the conversations you want to have, or might be a conversation that, where I've had conversations where you're sitting down saying, man, you are not happy here. What are you doing here? Right? You are
Yeah.
meant for better things. And when you're committed, the kind of loyalty that engenders from people is incredible, but that requires a commitment to the individual, not just a commitment to what they can do for the organization or for you or for the team. And so that's an
Yeah.
incredibly powerful lesson.
And sometimes, sometimes relationships end too. And that's okay. You don't need to sit in an abusive relationship at work or in your personal life and just be like, well, I'm committed to the person. That's not healthy.
Appreciate it.
But to at least try to realize, like, have I tried to commit to this person? Have I tried to work through this? And then if that's not working, then we can make another decision. If I'm willing to invest in the person on my team and try to help them become their best, and they don't take that opportunity or they don't react, then that's on them. But to just say like, oh, I don't like this, and to move on, that's not great leadership. I have somebody in my sphere who is very committed to their partner and their spouse. And right now they're having a tough time because they both want different things and they have some different values that are kind of coming to a head right now. And they're both incredibly committed to each other, and they are putting in a lot of work to make it work. Whether it does or not, I don't know, but I think they will both feel confident either way that they were committed. And I think that's all you can really ask for.
It's a perfect way, I think, to wrap up this conversation. So, Brian, this was incredible, great insights. Whatever the assessment was you took, I think nailed it. Everybody, anybody that listens to this is going to feel like this dude's definitely led with openness. So thank you for that. This was a gift. I really appreciate you making time to be here.
Anything you need, I'm always there. I've enjoyed our relationship and the way that it is and continues to be building.
Awesome. We'll see you soon. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. More importantly, I hope you learned something from the episode that can help you right away. Now, if you'd like to reflect on what you can learn from your own healthy, positive relationships to make work better, I've included a link in the description below where you can access and download what I call the relationship reflection exercise. This includes the same questions that I ask each of my guests to reflect on prior to our conversation on the webcast. Also, if you found today's episode valuable, I'd ask 3 quick favors of you. Number 1, please like the episode. By liking the video and adding a comment if something spoke to you or stood out to you as really significant, you give me some great and valuable feedback, but you also help others find the video. I'd also ask you to subscribe to the channel. That does 2 important things. 1, it makes sure that you won't miss any upcoming episodes, and it sends me the message that you like the kind of content that I'm creating here. And finally, please share this video with someone who you think might benefit. What better gift can you give someone than the gift of better relationships and a better work experience? I'm really grateful that you were here today, and I look forward to seeing you next time.